What's up, y'all? It's your girl Amanda, and we are back with another episode of Mandy's Entertainment Reviews. So, for this episode, we are reviewing the Janet Jackson docuseries. So, this docuseries it came out on A&E back in like 2022. It was, I think, a little bit after pandemic, but before Janet went back on tour. So, again, it was on A&E. I actually found this on Amazon Prime. It was free. All parts, it was 4 parts. All parts were free to stream. So you don't, if you want to watch it, you don't have to buy it. You don't have to like go around like a paywall or something. If you don't have Amazon Prime, it is completely free to watch. It came out in 2022, 4 parts. So the reason why I wanted to watch this is because I love Janet Jackson. I grew up listening to Janet. I remember when a lot of her albums after, I want to say, because Janet, the album came out in 93, and then after that was Velvet Rope, and that came out in like 97. I was 2, but I remember when that album came out. So I do remember watching Janet Jackson videos. The first Janet Jackson video I clearly remember was Every Time from the Velvet Rope, and she had like color contacts in. She had like probably a tube top on. She wasn't really shirtless, and her hair was like really wet, and she was like singing in a mirror. I remember that being played on the box like 100 years ago, but she was gorgeous in that video, by the way. So, I have seen this documentary before when it first came out, but the thing is, I watched it on a streaming service. It was on A&E, so I probably had like either Philo or Sling TV at the time. And obviously, those streaming services, they they're like, you got to connect to the Wi-Fi to watch those services, and when your Wi-Fi acts up, you're not going to watch anything. And I probably had an issue with my Wi-Fi, so I never really got a chance to finish the docu-series. So I just took it as an opportunity to finish what I didn't see. So as you guys know, I do my reviews in KWL, Know, Want to Know, and Learned. So I want to start with Know. Now, if y'all are looking at my list, or if you hear my list, and I know you're probably thinking, well, you should know more than that. Y'all gotta understand, I'm very limited on space when it comes to this Janet Jackson situation. I've been watching Janet my whole life, so I know way more than what I'm about to share with you guys. I know, but limited on space here. So, what do I know? Janet Jackson is a member of the famous Jackson family. They're from Gary, Indiana, which is about, I want to say like 25 minutes from where I grew up. So I've been to Gary a few times. I've never seen the Jackson household, but I've seen parts of Gary. There is like the obvious poor parts of Gary, but also a lot of people don't know is that Gary also has a beach. It's called Miller Beach. So people do have like $1 million beach houses and stuff there. So they're from Gary. She's been acting since the 70s. She was in Good Times. She was Penny, Lona's adopted daughter, and then they did a variety show where she did some acting there. She's been recording music since the 80s. Also, she does have 2 albums before Control, but they're lesser known, if you will. She did background vocals, obviously for her brother Michael Jackson, and also for R&B singer Chucky Booker from the 90s. One of my favorite Janet Jackson songs is actually the collaboration she did with Michael, Scream, which is on the History album. And I didn't know about the History album until like Michael Jackson died. And I actually went and found the whole album. I bought the double disc. And I can't believe I freaking sold it, man. I want to buy it back. But I had the double disc, and I bought it around the time Michael Jackson had died. So I went to the FYE in Maryville, and Maryville is right next to Gary, where the Jacksons are from. So I don't know if they were intentionally like price gouging, but I bought the History album, double disc album, for like $40. And let me tell you, one of my favorite albums of all time. No skips. On disc 2, because disc 1 is like all the hits, like from Off the Wall and all that stuff. But I have those albums. But disc 2, all the hits. Um, there is a DJ Quick remix of All For You. I don't think it's ever been commercially released, but it is on YouTube. It's really good. It has all of Quick's production percussions on it and stuff. Just dope. Like I could every time I play that song, I could just hear like a fashion show being had to that song or something. It's really a great song. She was in a relationship with Jermaine Dupri for I think 8 years, but they broke up. She's the youngest Jackson sibling. So, youngest Jackson sibling. She's the youngest. Well, technically she is, but she isn't. Out of Joe and Catherine's union, they are, but they also have a half sister named Giovanni, who was an outside child because Joe cheated on his wife. She's been married 3 times. I think she still is married to her last husband. They haven't like finalized their divorce. And she lives in London because of him. And I think I have a sense like every time I read like a interview or something from her, she don't like living in London. She wants to come back home to the States. That's what I feel like. She has one son from her last marriage. She's a fashionista. So I do see her with a lot of like high heels on and stuff, a lot of like flowy blouses. So another thing I know, like I think is I don't know if it's been confirmed, but Janet was actually seen out at the New Edition concert in Detroit, and she's actually quote unquote allegedly dating Mustafa Farrakhan, who is I think the son of Minister Farrakhan. So she looked beautiful, and then also she was at like Savior's Day and she looked flawless, like her hair was beautiful, everything. So she is a fashionista. Also, oh, I did say that she lives in London due to her separation from her husband. Also, she had a huge auction some years ago. It auctioned off a lot of her shoes, her music video costumes, a lot of her concert costumes. She auctioned off furniture. She auctioned off her cars. I know it was like a Aston Martin or something being auctioned off there. She had a lot of nice stuff, but it was just so expensive. I never put any bids on it, but it was really nice. So what do I want to know? Does she have any memories of Gary? Janet was born in 1966, so the Jackson family was by the time it was like 1970 something, the Jacksons were already in like LA. So does she have any memories of living in Gary? What is her relationships like with her sisters Latoya and Rebe? Latoya I think lives in LA. Rebe lives in either Vegas or LA. And the reason why I ask that is because it's like somebody's birthday, she'll normally like put out a shout out like, "Oh, happy birthday! I miss you. I love you. Enjoy your day." Blah blah blah. I haven't seen one for Latoya, but I can't say I haven't seen one for Rebe. Rebe is a Jehovah's Witness. She doesn't celebrate birthdays, but I haven't really seen one for Latoya. But if there is one, send me a screenshot because I don't want to be sitting up here saying the wrong thing and then it's out there, you know. What was her first audition like for anything, music, acting, just any type of audition? Her first audition ever. What was that like? What is her education background? I didn't hear anything about Janet going to college. So, what education does she have? Does she have just a high school diploma? Was she homeschooled? Like, what is her education background? Is there anything we didn't know about her marriages? The Jackson family they're very private people. They don't talk about a lot. So, like, what do we not know about her marriage that wasn't in the press or wasn't discussed amongst anybody? Like, what do we know? What do they know that we don't know? Will her last marriage ever be mentioned? Is there any stories from the late 90s to the early 2000s? The reason why I ask that is that's the era of Janet I truly know. I remember after the Velvet Rope came out, then I remember Doesn't Really Matter on the Clumps soundtrack. That was heavily played a lot, and I love that video. And I remember when the Clumps came out, me and my family, we rolled deep to go see that movie. Like my aunt, my grandmother, my cousin, like all of us went to the River Oaks Theater. Rest in peace, River Oaks Theater. And we went to go see that movie. We took up a whole row to see it, and it was Janet Jackson in the movie. So yeah. And why didn't she move to Atlanta to be with Jermaine Dupri? The reason why I asked that is because, spoiler alert, I was watching the documentary and there was some footage of her and she was at Jermaine Dupri's house and she just seemed so at home, playing with the dogs, and she's driving to get Smoothie King. Just, she seems so at home. So, learned, I have a long list here. So, my disclaimer, as I always say, the learned may or may not answer my questions that I wrote down, which is okay. If you do have an answer, feel free to share it with me. I don't mind it. We are a community here. All right, so the first thing I learned is that the camera crew followed her for 5 years to do this docu-series, which I thought was like crazy long because, again, the Jacksons are very private people. They don't really do reality TVs shows. I've never seen a Jackson on a reality TV show except the reality show that came out around Michael Jackson's death, and then that other one with 3T. I think those are the only two I'm familiar with, but they really don't do like reality TVs or have cameras following around. And for 5 years, my God, that's a long time to have some cameras following you, because you'd probably be sick of them by like year year one and a half, probably. So yeah, the camera crew followed her for 5 years to get all this footage of her. She has not been to Gary since she was 8 years old. So in the documentary, her and Randy, who is, I think, the brother after Michael and before her, they went to Gary and he gave her a tour of the house and, oh, your parents slept here. Me and Michael and the guys slept here. He gave her a little tour because obviously she, I guess, didn't remember. So, Janet remembers the order of siblings by pattern: girl, three boys, girl, three boys, girl. Now, the reason I put that there is because I thought I was the only one that used like a certain pattern to remember like order of kids. Now, there's four kids. Well, my dad had four, my mama had two. So, obviously, me and Justin. But my dad had four, but I use like something like this method for my grandparents. So my grandmother had five children, right? So each child had children, and then some of my cousins have children. So it's a lot of grandchildren and great grands and all that stuff. So sometimes at family barbecues, what we do is like we have to draw out like a little chart or a circle chart or something. Okay, so my cousin's name is, for example, Taylor. Taylor has one son, so we draw a line from Taylor's name to her son's name. My other cousin, Sabrina. Okay, Sabrina. From my her parents, my aunt and uncle. Okay, then we got Sabrina, and then boom, Sabrina has children. So stuff like that. So that like people do things to remember who's in their family. Um, she hits like a man, according to Randy. I mean, I'm the youngest of four. She's the youngest of like, what, six, seven. So I don't know. I think that's a younger sibling thing. The Jackson family house in Gary was 670 feet, so two-bedroom, living room, and a kitchen. The reason why I put that is because I thought it was smaller, like a tiny house. Legally, to be classified as a tiny house on wheels, even though I know the Jackson house was not on wheels, but like I thought it was the same size as a tiny house on wheels, which is like 399, but it's actually 670, which is bigger than what I thought. Catherine worked at Sears. Joe worked at the steel mill, and that steel mill is still there. You know what's crazy? It's been there for like 100 years. My great grandfather worked at this Gary steel mill too. Excuse me. So yeah, excuse me. I had to cough. So yeah, Catherine worked at Sears. She was a saleswoman, and for years, there was a Sears in Gary. I always thought she worked at the Sears in Maryville because that's the only Sears I know that was close to Gary. But I guess Gary had a Sears, and yeah, the 100-year-old steel mill, which still is running to this day. Great grandfather worked there. Crazy. I don't know if they worked together because my great grandfather probably died in like the 40s or early 50s. I don't know. It was my mom's dad's father, so I don't know much about that side of the family, but yeah. Um Watching this documentary, Janet kind of developed a California accent. So I'm from the Midwest. You could clearly hear my dialect and everything, right? But if you hear Janet talk, like, she talks like a Californian, even though she was born in Indiana. It's just go watch some interviews. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but just go watch the interviews because she definitely talks like a Californian. Katherine Jackson designed the Jackson 5 costumes. She did a good job with keeping up with the times, I should say, because I remember watching Save the Children, the documentary that Jesse Jackson did. That it was a concert benefiting like the Push Coalition or something for Save the Children, and they were wearing like it was the early '70s, so you know a lot of color, a lot of flower, a lot of hippie doodah stuff, and they wore like these costumes with like flowers and stuff on them. So she really did a good job with maintaining with the times. Havenhurst was on 3 acres. Havenhurst is their home where they lived. They were the first black family and they didn't get welcomed. Now, that kind of surprised me because I always look at California as like a carefree, very welcoming state, and I didn't know that they were like not welcome in a place like California. But you know, it was the '70s and they weren't quite out the racism woods, if you will. So yeah, Havenhurst was on 3 acres. I always thought it was on less, because when you see like an aerial version of Havenhurst, you can kind of see their neighbors. But maybe they when you're on ground, it looks much different. But every time I see like the aerial view of Havenhurst, I could just like see their neighbor's house. So I didn't know it was on 3 acres. I was probably assuming it was on like an acre and a quarter, 1.25. Sorry. So yeah. She would watch her brothers rehearse. I mean, there was footage of her sitting on a high stool watching them rehearse. The Jacksons flew Delta, so they was bougie when they started making a little money. I wonder if they had Biscoff cookies back then. That would have been so awesome if they did. Janet's first time on stage was in the '70s in Las Vegas during that variety show. And during that time, they were the only kids performing, which makes sense because Vegas, it wasn't really kid friendly back in the day on the strip. Either you gambled, you went to see a comedy show, you went to see like a burlesque show or something. So it wasn't very kid friendly, and they were the only kids performing. She recorded a song at the home studio because Havenhurst had a home studio. That's where most of like Thriller and stuff was recorded. So she recorded a song, and that's when Joe discovered the song. She must have left it laying around or whatever, and that's when he wanted her to sing. So that's technically her discovery, even though it was her own father. And her original plan, she wanted to go to college and study business law, which honestly I think she would have been very good at, because if you watch like her roles as like CEO and bosses, Why Did I Get Married, For Color Girls, even The Clumps, like she would have been like a great person in that field, you know. So now I'm on page 2. So page 2, Joe focused on Janet after being fired from the Jacksons. And I do remember them being fired, him being fired by the Jacksons, but I always wondered, like, what happened after? Like, what was life after for him? Like, what did he do? Like, who did he manage? Whatever. So he went and moved on to Janet. She didn't write any of the material on her debut album. I guess that's another reason why it didn't do well, because it wasn't her original material. As I stated before, her debut albums weren't successful. They weren't, you know, memorable, if you will. I didn't really know about those first 2 albums until I was like grown, because I always remembered Control, Rhythm Nation, Janet, Velvet Rope, yada yada yada. But she actually had 2 albums before that. Janet and James DeBarge, they met. They were childhood friends. You gotta remember the DeBarges were teen pop stars, as Janet Jackson was. The DeBarge family, and they're both from the Midwest, because James is from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Janet's from Gary, so their birth states were neighbors. Janet got married in Michigan by DeBarge's uncle, and then her new husband went off to do drugs in on the night of their wedding. The reason I put that is because I didn't know they got married in Michigan, and I didn't know they got married by DeBarge's uncle, and I think the DeBarges were religious. Their mom was like a pastor or something, but I didn't know she got married in Michigan. I thought she ran off and got married in Vegas, but not Michigan. Um, as we know, Janet Jackson did the TV show Fame, but she didn't want to do it because she was too worried about James. She was going to bypass an opportunity because she was too worried about her husband, James. Now, I understand, being a wife, you always got to worry about your husband, but girl, this is a big opportunity. Like, go to work, then worry about James later. So we all know the rumor that Janet had a secret baby, right? And they said that one of Janet's nieces was her daughter because the Jackson gene is so strong. One of her nieces, I think it's Marlon's daughter, or Marlon or Jackie's daughter, was accused of being her daughter, and she's pregnant because she gained weight. Well, that was from when she was on birth control. So yeah, well, I think I forgot her name, but she really do look like Janet and Rebe. But I think she's got to be either Marlon or Jackie's daughter. She's the older Jackson grandchild. So, Michael would put Janet in his car and play his music, what he's been working on and stuff. I always thought that was nice. I don't know what format that would work on because this was back in the 80s. So did he do it on tape or something? Like, I don't know. Like, but that was really cool to know. There was a shift in their closeness during the Thriller days. I think that's when Michael's stardom really took off, and then he started being in the tabloids and stuff. So when you are on that level of stardom, like, you got to be all over the place. You got to be all over the world. So obviously he was just too busy for her. So yeah. Janet fired Joe Jackson to do things her way, and after Janet fired Joe, that's when he officially left the show business. I don't know what he was doing after that. Like, I think we need a documentary on Joe Jackson as well, just to kind of figure out what he did after he was fired by, the Jacksons and Janet Jackson. Because of course I saw him like on TV doing interviews regarding, Michael, but like, what did you do after Janet? You know what I mean? So, Joe's old receptionist went on to be Janet's assistant, which was, I thought, really nice because after Joe got fired by Janet, he closed down his office and the young lady was out of a job. So I guess she kept working within the family through that opportunity. So Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, they were a part of the Time, and during the Time concert, that's when they met Janet. And Janet was not a fan of Bubbles, who was Michael's chimpanzee. I always thought Bubbles was friendly because Michael had him so trained, but I guess not because Janet didn't like him. So Janet got a divorce and she met her second husband in the late 80s. I always thought it was the early 90s he met her. And the way he showed him, he was like, to me, a nerdy, swaggy guy. And they were introduced by a friend. So I guess the style of 2019, when everybody was dressing all nerdy and swaggy, if they saw this documentary and they saw how Renee was dressed, they would definitely have taken like the inspiration for that. When Renee and Janet were together, a lot of their relationship was filmed through camcorder, but none of the footage has been seen until the documentary. So I just want to know, how much did A&E pay Renee for the footage? That's what I want to know, because it was a lot of footage. Like, honestly, I would not want to be recorded 24/7, but mainly because Renee comes from like a filmmaking family. But Jesus Christ, do filmmaking families do 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 they like, I just, maybe I'm just reaching, but I do want to know how much that footage was paid for, and having a lot of their relationship film. I don't know. Maybe he should have burned that and just go off stories. I don't know. Moving on. Renee proposed to Janet on the beach, which I think was romantic. But what was sad was that she revealed that James DeBarge never proposed to her or gave her a ring. I think they just ran off and eloped in Michigan, and then everything just went downhill for her after that. She was always asked about Michael, which is really annoying. Like, it even happens to us normal people. Like, if, growing up, you saw you and a sibling together, and then you get older, you kind of do your own thing, and said family member be like, where's such and so at? Where's such and so at? I understand how annoying that could be, because she would always ask, how's Michael? Michael's doing blah, 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 because Michael was too busy promoting the Bad album, being on the Bad tour and stuff. So, yeah. There were disagreements with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis during the Rhythm Nation recording. I guess that happens when like a lot of creatives kind of go head and head together. Like, you don't always agree on things, which is completely normal. Rhythm Nation was her first tour. I always thought that for the Control album, that was her first tour, but nope, Rhythm Nation was her first tour and also her first Grammy. But Control had such like a strong, powerful message. How was that not her first Grammy? But either way, Q-Tip first met Janet on the set of Poetic Justice, because honestly, I forgot that Q-Tip was in Poetic Justice. I honestly thought they probably met like on some other film set or award show or whatever. But nope, it was on the set of Poetic Justice. Renee directed Janet's music video. I think it was Again that he directed. And for that video, Janet said she needed help with her sexier image, and she asked her choreographer Tina Landon, who is also her friend. And when I read that, I couldn't believe it, but then I was like, I could believe it, because Janet Jackson, when you hear the words Janet Jackson, you automatically associate the word sexy with Janet Jackson, right? But you got to also remember that Janet Jackson grew up in a conservative Jehovah's Witness family. That was not allowed, per se. So, Again was nominated for an Oscar for original song, so I didn't know that she was nominated for an Oscar. Katherine Jackson and Rebe Jackson didn't like the Rolling Stone cover that she did with Renee's hands covering her boobs. That I can understand, because, again, the conservative Jehovah's Witness situation. Janet would do like the sexy performances. I know the one she did for Would You Mind, or Do You Mind, or it's that one song from All For You. But she also did one during the Janet era for that album. She did one with Shaquille O'Neal, and I was like, I didn't know she did it with Shaq. And she's like the originator of on-stage lap dances, I guess, because if you guys remember, at the BET Awards, probably back in like 2005, Destiny's Child, when they were doing like their last album era, they did it for Cater to You. Remember that? So, but Janet Jackson, she's the originator. She lost the Coca-Cola deal due to Michael Jackson's 1993 sexual abuse accusations that should not have happened on Michael's end and on Janet's end. She should not have lost that because somebody decided to be greedy and extort an innocent man. That should not have happened at all. And she would stay at his ranch to support him. I never knew that. I always saw like her at the ranch playing because of Michael Jackson's home videos, but I never knew she stayed there a lot, or not a lot, but I never knew she like stayed there. I didn't know Michael Jackson had an apartment in New York. That's where they wrote Scream, which is, again, my favorite Michael Jackson song. I always thought he had like California real estate, but I didn't know he had an apartment in New York. And then I also heard he rented like a beautiful townhouse when he was recording Invincible in New York, but I never knew he had an apartment, so that was kind of cool to find out. And I saw the inside of it. It was like a lot of it looked like Neverland, how Neverland was set up, like a lot of stuff all over the place, but it was decorated real fancy and stuff. The Scream video wasn't what we thought. So Scream was known for being expensive, but Janet said it was overly expensive. It didn't have to be expensive. She couldn't see her brother because of the label, which didn't make sense to me because there's photos of them laughing and talking behind the scenes, so I didn't understand that part. And there were day and night separate shoots, so I guess to her, the Scream video was kind of miserable. It looked like they were having fun and having a good time and playing around, but it was kind of miserable to her. So we're going towards the end, like probably the late 90s, early 2000s, into the 2000s, into the 2020s. Janet wanted to discuss a Jackson's reunion tour in the 2000s. She wanted to open it. It was Janet and her brothers, all her brothers, and she said, I would be honored to open for you guys. Never knew that. Getting back to Renee would overstep his boundaries with the camera. There was a part where Janet was like, Renee, don't film my mother. And then her friends would be kind of annoyed with Renee having the cameras in their face. Like, you should know when it's time to turn the camera off, Renee. Like, he was doing too much. But it was also revealed another reason why him and Janet's marriage fell apart was because he had a painkiller addiction. A drug addiction like her first husband. The Velvet Rope album was the hardest album she had to make because she had depression. Of course, what was going on with her and her husband. And I was kind of shocked to find that out because as an adult, I listened to that album. To me, it gives a fun vibe off, like free zone, like house-esque music. I Get So Lonely, sexy, go deep, fun and sexy, stuff like that. So, but I didn't know it was like the hardest album she had to make. Renee started to become mean. He was on her about her looks, and they were married all this time. That man did not love Janet unconditionally. See, now y'all, how do you know that you got a good man? How do I know I got a good man? I got a good example. When I started dating my boyfriend, which was like 2 years ago, I was like almost 230 pounds, right? He would still call me beautiful, all that stuff. And I've lost a majority of that weight. I'm still called beautiful and stuff. And a man who like does what Renee did, get on her about her looks, pressuring her to look like something of your past, like that's not cool. That's not cool. A real man will love you and support you and stand by you no matter what you look like. So, yeah. And that was really mean of him. But it's partially maybe because of the painkillers. Janet developed early. She had her chest binded on Good Times because she played like a little girl. And little girls don't have a developed, you know what I mean? So I couldn't imagine the pain. That kind of hurts. Oof, that really hurts. She says she hasn't given up on love. Now, mind y'all, this documentary is from like 3-4 years ago. She's now dating Mustafa Farrakhan, allegedly. So, of course, she stands on that, I guess. Jermaine Dupri met Janet at an Atlanta concert. Again, it's Janet Jackson. I always thought she would meet people at like these award shows and these after parties and all that stuff. But no, she met Jermaine Dupri at an Atlanta concert. And she met Justin Timberlake from an NSYNC concert. Well, NSYNC opened it up for her. I didn't know NSYNC opened up for Janet Jackson at one point. I always thought NSYNC would just went on concert and had their own thing and didn't have openers like, oh, here's NSYNC. So I never knew they opened for her. Jermaine Dupri was actually at the Super Bowl incident. He was backstage, but he didn't see what actually happened. Janet told Justin not to actually say anything. True story. So that's why Justin Timberlake didn't say anything, because she told him not to say anything. Now don't y'all get mad at me and say, it was said in the documentary. Go back and watch it. And also, what was messed up in all of this, and she was carrying the stress of that, her brother Michael was on trial during the Super Bowl. So imagine the world is picking on you and your brother is going through a trial that could potentially put him in jail, which it didn't. He was found not guilty. Let's not forget that. But, going through trial and stuff. Messed up. Jermaine Dupri resigned from the Grammy Board due to the treatment of Janet, as he should have. And Janet made a video confirming that it was an accident. And looking back at that whole thing, after all these years, I could have told y'all that it was an accident. Because clearly she wore a red bra, right? And he was supposed to rip off the black part and show the red bra. Hello. It was an accident, clear as day. Jermaine Dupri proposed to Janet. So technically he was her fiance. We always called him her boyfriend. He lived in Atlanta. She lived in LA. So she never officially lived in Atlanta, but she looked so at home in Atlanta. I hate that it didn't work out. Why did they break up? Jermaine Dupri, I was a man. He cheated. And Janet also insinuated that as well. And then also he was a workaholic and he didn't have time for a girlfriend. Rebe Jackson, she did say that there was no privacy when Michael Jackson died. Oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember how people were camped out outside the house on Carrollwood. I remember she said she's at the grocery store and there's pictures of her family on magazine covers, because that's all you saw for the first 2 years after Michael Jackson died was his family and him on the magazine covers. And then 2011, 2012 was the trial of Conrad Murray. So, oof, that was rough. It was a lot. But it didn't really truly die down to 2015-ish. That's when we really stopped seeing Michael Jackson's face on those National Enquirers and People magazine and stuff. Janet was a member of the Trying to Conceive community. I didn't know that. And lastly, Janet was with Joe in his last days, and he met her baby. Now, because Janet lived in London, I always thought that she was super estranged from the family, but I guess not. She always went to go see her family. So that's what I learned in the documentary. So again, it was 4 parts. I give this documentary 4 out of 5 stars. What I liked about the documentary was that I saw Tito Jackson, her brother, who passed away, I think, 2 years ago. He had a heart attack while on his way back to, I think, Oklahoma, or he was going to LA. And unfortunately, he passed away from a heart attack. They visited the Jackson house, just for her to see it, because she hasn't been back to Gary in years. The documentary did speak on the social issues in the 60s. She was born in 66. Her brothers were older, so they probably remember more than her, but she spoke on it. Michael Jackson and Jackson's voices were archived because I think Joe passed away before this documentary came out, and we all know Michael Jackson actually passed away in 2009. When she was leaving the Gary house, she was interacting with the locals there, so that was really nice to see. And also seeing unseen footage of Janet and JD, because they were together for so long. I've never seen a lot of footage of them in their private time, when they were on a plane or when they're at home, just stuff like that. Now, what made it 4 out of 5 is some of the things I disliked. I disliked that they showed abandoned Gary, Indiana footages. As I told you guys before, Gary has a beach. Gary has people who live in beach houses there. So it's not all ugly and bad. I dislike the fact that she was being an empath, and she was getting in bad situations with her partners, going out to look for James the Barge in the morning, trying to find him. He's high somewhere, and protecting the badness in her relationships and stuff. I think that's what's called being an empath. She was cold. She kind of gave a cold look when she talked about past relationships. I mean, obviously, yeah, because they weren't the best, but she didn't have to give it a cold look, in my opinion. And lastly, the footage of Renee is now public. She has to see all the. It probably breaks her heart that she saw what once was, So, but yeah, that is my review of the Janet Jackson documentary. Again, you can watch it on Amazon Prime for free if you don't have Prime, but it's there for you either way if you do. So thank y'all for listening, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.